right, guys, welcome back to the BlockHash podcast, episode 241. Today, I have Tomer Weller. He is the VP of Tech Strategy at the Stellar Development Foundation. Tomer, how you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Happy to have you on. It's an absolute pleasure. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about regarding Stellar, but before we do, tell me a bit more about yourself and your background. How did you get into this space? How did you find yourself where you are now with Stellar?
Sure. So right now I'm VP of Tech Strategy at the Stellar Development Foundation. And I've been with Stellar since 2017. Before that, I was at the MIT Media Lab working on a bunch of different projects. Spent some time on digital fabrication, worked for a year on 3D glass printing. So a lot of things, not exactly blockchain related. And around 2017, I was in San Francisco. I decided that it's time to get a grown-up job. And I was actually just about to take an offer from Lyft when a friend suggested that I meet Jed McCaleb from Stellar. And to be honest, I had no idea who Jed was, even though he was a bit of a celebrity in this space. I have not heard of, Mt. Gox, Ripple, Stellar. But I did. I was familiar with one project of his from the late 90s called eDonkey 2000, which is a bit of an obscure project here in the States, but in Israel, where I'm from, it was pretty big in the file sharing space. Obviously, only sharing legal files. So I took this meeting with Jed, learned about Stellar, met up with him, met up with David, chief scientist, and the guy who wrote the Stellar Consensus Protocol. I was really excited about the mission, really liked the people. So a week later, I packed up my shit and moved from Boston to San Francisco, and I've been with Stellar ever since.
Nice. Well, what's eDonkey again? Is it a file sharing system?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had a Twitter Spaces with Jed a few days ago, and we spoke about this. eDonkey 2000 was one of the in the late 90s, post Napster. There were a bunch of file sharing apps. There was like Kazaa, LimeWire. eDonkey 2000 was one of them, and it was just really huge in Israel. And I actually asked Jed why would he name a project such a silly name. And he said that he went on like one of the like domain registers, and they just like had like arbitrary names that they would suggest to you. And one of them was like eMonkey 2000, and he thought that it would be really funny if there would be like a New York Times article in which they would write about this project, and a silly name like eDonkey 2000 would show up there, which eventually it did. So great success.
That's fantastic. I thought it was like a game. I was like, what's eDonkey 2000? I've never heard of that. It's like a Donkey Kong spinoff or something.
Kind of.
But I don't know. Sometimes it's the most creative names that are the most attractive, and even though they aren't relatable, like GoDaddy, for example, like what does that really have to do with domains? But it gets your attention.
Yeah, and I was actually a couple of years ago. I was talking with Justin Rice, who you met last year, our VP ecosystem, about silly names, because I was making the point that crypto projects should have like more serious names. And what Justin, who's a musician by training or by profession, told me is that like a lot of the greatest bands of all times have like objectively like really silly names, like even something like the
Hmm.
Beatles, so I should just like let go and have people choose their silly project names.
Yeah, it's more of an advertising and marketing thing than anything. Just a
Yeah.
name that stands out, that's unique, sometimes is better than something that's super serious all the time. Um, what's a day in the life like for a VP of tech strategy at the Stellar Development Foundation? Like, what do you do? What do you find yourself working on often?
It's a great question. So it's very diverse, and I get to work. I'm very lucky to work with pretty much every team in the foundation, from business development to Justin's team to ecosystem to all of our engineering teams. A lot of it is meetings, which can be nice sometimes, can also be very tiring. Specifically, right now, we're working very hard on Project Jump Cannon, which I imagine we'll talk about in a bit. which is smart contracts on Stellar. But when you take on such a major project, you have to coordinate across the organization because you have the developer relations folks that need to write documentation and think about the onboarding experience. You need to think about the contracts themselves. How do they integrate with something like Stellar Core, which is the core engineering team? Then you need to have API access, which is Horizon, which is this API layer. So it's really interesting. It's coordinating a lot of interesting folks working on a lot of interesting topics.
What's the most exciting thing that you've been working on lately?
Oh, it's definitely that. Yeah, jump cannon. So,
Hmm.
Stellar is one of the most experienced blockchains app. It's been around for a while, right? Since 2014, even before Ethereum was out. So the world of blockchains has changed a lot in the 7 years or 8 years since Stellar launched. So we've learned a lot. Stellar didn't actually launch with a smart contracts layer, and the
Hmm.
idea when launching Stellar was we're going to be really focused on cross-border payments and issuing assets. And so, we're going to give developers exactly what they need to build that, rather than building like this very, cumbersome execution layer that is a bit slower and has like more surface area for attacks. And it's worked very well. Like we've had a lot of we have like global access to the network across the world. It's super fast, robust, cheap. And we have this Anchor network, which is a network of interoperable on and off ramps around the world and pretty much every continent. So, it's worked well. But right now, after thinking about this a lot and talking with the ecosystem, listening to feedback, we're also really interested in combining this uh, interoperability with the fiat world, with the classic finance world, with decentralized finance and all the benefits that has for equitable access.
Nice. What are some of the projects that you guys are working on more specifically? I know that you guys are doing a lot more stuff now, even with smart contracts, trying to implement that as a layer now. Give me a little bit of insight into what's it like right now.
So one thing that's really excited that happened last year was that we launched AMMs, automatic market makers,
Hmm.
in the protocol, which means that if you're familiar with things like Uniswap, you can deposit liquidity into any asset pair on the network, and collect trading fees, and anyone can move between assets either through the decentralized exchange that's been around since the early days of Stellar, since 2015, or through these liquidity pools. So that was a really exciting project. Took us, most of last year to get off the ground, and we're seeing success in terms of actual liquidity being deposited there. But one thing we realized is that there's a long list of other types of innovation that we want to see in the protocol. And right now, without smart contracts, each of these have to be coded directly into the protocol layer. So you need to write, C++ code in Stellar Core to get these things off the ground. You need to be, it's just a bit of a tedious process. And most of the folks that are actually capable of doing that are, in the Stellar Core team and the SDF. And we really want to open this up to everyone. So that's why we're building Project Jump Cannon, which is introducing smart contracts on Stellar. In terms of projects that we're looking to see, we're already talking with several folks building various types of liquidity pools on Stellar. And we're also seeing a lot of interest in the collateralized lending space. So I think we're going to see some really interesting projects there.
Nice. Are you guys mostly focused on creating finance use cases around these smart contracts, or do you want to do other things like maybe create games or create I don't know. There's so many different things you could do. Do you want to branch out outside of payments and remittance and finance, or do you want to stay in that niche?
So the interesting thing about being in an open governance network where people don't need permission to do anything on the network, right? So while the foundation itself has been focused on the financial inclusion use cases throughout the years, what we've seen is that a lot of people venture out and do really interesting things, like in the world of in the world of gaming, or in the world of NFTs, for example. So, I was a bit of an NFT skeptic for many years, and even though I personally was a skeptic, and we didn't focus it in on this work in the foundation, we did see a lot of interesting projects coming from the ecosystem. So this is like a grassroots activity, the whole NFT space. And now we have a huge, awesome marketplace in Stellar. It's called Lightmint for NFTs on Stellar. We're really excited about it. We recently worked with the CEO of Lightmint on building this interoperable standard, so that other chains or other wallets can also connect to this marketplace. So we're seeing a lot of grassroots activity, and eventually, I think that, like, the point where it really clicked for me was there's this company on the network called Leaf Global. And Leaf Global, what they do is they use tokenized assets to help refugees fleeing from specific countries. And it's a really interesting use case because crossing a border with a lot of money is actually very dangerous. So if you can tokenize your assets before crossing the border, and not travel with a lot of cash on you, then that's something that's really beneficial. So we've seen interesting collaborations like Lightmint, this NFT marketplace, working with Leaf Global on having refugee artists issue NFTs on Stellar through Lightmint. So you have this uh, really interesting intersection where financial inclusion, meets this, artist marketplace. So we're really excited about this.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Do you guys want to help try and cultivate that more? Do you want to see more NFTs on Stellar, or is that really just a niche grassroots, type of movement that's just happened randomly?
We're really interested in seeing it growing. So we actually have been our DevRel team has been starting an NFT workshop series, which we gave the first instance of in South by Southwest a couple of weeks ago. The DevRel team is actually heading towards Paris, to Paris Blockchain Week, and they're doing another instance of this workshop. So we're really putting a lot of effort into, like, we realize that we don't have all the answers, and we just want to collaborate with the ecosystem. So we've seen this thing that's working. We want to help people continue building on that.
Are there fees associated with minting an NFT on Stellar?
Yeah, so like any operation on Stellar, there's an XLM fee associated with it.
Hmm.
The fees are very low right now; they're like a fraction of a cent. So it's not even, it's not comparable to the things you see in other networks where you need to spend tens of dollars, sometimes even hundreds, to issue an NFT.
Yeah, just to transfer an NFT on Ethereum cost me like $120, which is absolutely insane. Imagine if you're trying to price something between $10 and $20 and allow everyone access to it, but you can't afford to do it because it costs 10 times the amount. Do you ever see that becoming an issue on Stellar? If there's a lot of people jumping in wanting to create NFTs and write smart contracts, would there ever be a fee issue, or do you think it's scalable enough that that's not likely?
I think right now it's scalable enough where it's not an issue, but it is something that we're putting a lot of emphasis on. And I think that if you look at the bigger cryptocurrency ecosystem, then we talk a big talk about equitable access. But if you need to pay $100 transaction fees to move an asset, then we have a serious accessibility issues, a serious accessibility issue with blockchain. So we're really focused on that. And even as we're building smart contracts, we want to make sure that smart contracts don't cannibalize the capacity of the network. Like the classic example that we saw back in 2018 was when CryptoKitties took over the Ethereum network. And to be honest, specifically in 2018, CryptoKitties is one of the best things that happened to Stellar, because we just like had companies calling us saying, "Hey, we wanted to build on Ethereum, but CryptoKitties, so we want to build on
Hmm.
Stellar now," because uh, it's really frustrating to build like a serious application on the network and then have some sort of like an overhyped project, that's completely unrelated to your project, effectively take over the entire bandwidth. So we want to make sure that things like payments and asset issuances, which are the core factors of like the we see for equitable access, we want to make sure these remain cheap. So you can think of it kind of like a toll road where you have lanes that are for cars, and then you have lanes for trucks. So I think of smart contracts as like the trucks. They have like their own lanes. They need to pay much more fees, but they don't block the entire road for people that want to take their Peugeot across the bridge.
Yeah, I think Vitalik said something way back along the lines of how can a large company like Microsoft, for example, build an enterprise level application on Ethereum if CryptoKitties one day is clogging up the network and their app can't work. It's not efficient. You can't scale. You can't make it inclusive for giant corporations to come in and do all these awesome things we want them to use blockchain for. Along the same lines, with the advent of smart contracts on Stellar, have you guys seen interest from um, entities, corporations, institutions, banks, anyone that wants to partner with the Stellar Development Foundation and build more on the network?
Yeah, sure. So we do talk with banks quite a lot.
Hmm.
Banks are a bit. And one thing we learned early on is that banks move slow, especially banks in the states. So our like go-to market and go-to strategy was to work with the smaller startups that are building, remittance agents or various like fintech operations, because they just move much faster. Um, but we have seen success with banks. We've also seen success with companies building regulated assets on top of Stellar. So companies like Securency, for example, that have a platform to issue a regulated asset on Stellar. So these are regulated things like equities, things like securities. So you should be able to issue, instead of like on a stock market, you issue it on Stellar, and then you have all of the um, you have all the benefits of being on a blockchain. Things like immediate liquidity, things like the fact that trading never stops. It's like 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And we're seeing more and more companies that are interested in this. Franklin Templeton are already um, they're running a few Stellar validators, and they already made a statement last year that they're going to build a money market fund on top of Stellar. So we're seeing a lot of interesting use cases from the more classic financial sector.
Nice. What are your guys' remittance goals in 2022? Like, do you guys want to eventually see global payments through Stellar, or a bigger banking partnership, or even micro payments, between customers and businesses? What types of goals do you guys have around the payments industry?
So long term, what we really want to see is Stellar becoming a payment standard, and that's because Stellar was never meant to be an island. It was always meant to be a bridge between different payment systems, and I think that's why we've been doing pretty well in getting access to around access around the world, because we don't have this like maximalist view of the world in which there is only Stellar. So, things like the MoneyGram integration that is ongoing right now and will soon pave the way to access between cash and crypto in like 300,000 locations around the world. We think that's a huge thing for interoperability between payment systems. And we really want to see like we have this anchor network that is growing right now, and MoneyGram is a very substantial player there. And what we want to see now is we want to see more interoperability with the rest of the cryptocurrency ecosystem. Because like I said, when we started in 2015, there was very little, DeFi going on, almost no blockchains. It's very clear that we're living in a cross-chain or a multi-chain world right now, and we want to make sure that people have the ability to move between these different blockchains. So one of the projects that we're working on right now is a bridge that will initially bridge between Stellar and Ethereum, and later on to other blockchains. And we're putting a strong emphasis on bridging, and we're also about to announce a bridge bounty that will allow other dev teams to build bridges to Stellar. And we're announcing a big XLM reward for that. And we're also working with existing bridge solutions, things like Flare and Pendulum that connect to other networks.
Have you guys considered a bridge ecosystem between like Bitcoin or another form of payment potentially, or I guess maybe just round payments in general? Have you guys thought about bridging and creating a more interoperable, God, that word's so hard to say, interoperable ecosystem, maybe between, I don't know, Bitcoin, Ripple, or Litecoin, or whatever else is out there?
First of all, I think you now invented a new term, minteroperable, which is
Interoperable.
minting in an interoperable way. I love it. I think we should use that more
You can have it.
often. Yeah, so definitely, we're seeing what's going on with Bitcoin. I'm really excited about Bitcoin in general and Lightning specifically. And I use Lightning on my phone. I really like it, and I definitely think that there is more room for interoperability, especially with Lightning, because it provides usable Bitcoin. Because to be honest, regular Bitcoin is just like not really usable in your everyday sense. So very excited about that. There is a company that's still in stealth mode that's actually working in that space between Stellar and Bitcoin. So I can't share any more information there, but I think we're going to see a lot more interoperability between Bitcoin and the rest of the blockchain ecosystem in the next year.
Nice. Overall, what are your guys' goals for the rest of 2022? What are some key things that you guys are excited about or that you want people to keep in mind or look forward to as we go through the rest of the year with Stellar?
So 2022 is definitely the year of smart contracts on Stellar. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on project Jump Cannon, which is introducing smart contracts. By the end of the year, we expect to launch on mainnet. It will probably be like a limited execution environment. So imagine that if you can do 1,000 transactions per ledger today in Stellar, we expect that only a small block size will actually be dedicated to smart contracts. But the contract would be stable. That means that people would be able to start building. We actually expect people to start building by the end of this quarter, Q2. And then in the beginning of next year, we plan on introducing a parallel execution engine, which means that we'll be able to scale up the smart contracts.
Cool, cool. Where can people go if they want to learn more about what you guys are doing at the Stellar Development Foundation or in the Stellar ecosystem in general? Do they just go to the website? Do you guys have a blog? Do you guys have a community? Where should people start going?
We have a very active developer Discord. I highly encourage folks to go to stellar.org and join a Discord. There's a developer portal in stellar.org, which is praised by many for being one of the best in the blockchain space. So highly recommended. Also, feel free to hit me up on Twitter or anywhere. I constantly post updates on Project Jump Cannon. And I, love getting feedback and talking with the ecosystem.
Yeah, it was easy to find you on social media, not because of your handle, but because of the glasses. And I was like, oh, well, there he is. That's him. Okay. So that made it very easy. So yeah, guys, go follow Tomer. Just look for the guy wearing the glasses. Go follow Stellar and check everything out and keep up with what they're doing. And make sure to like the video and subscribe below as well. Tomer, thank you for taking time to be on the podcast today and really dive into all the things you guys are doing with Stellar, especially around smart contracts. Very cool stuff. Very excited to see how that pans out because I've always known Stellar as a very more payments focused network. So it'll be interesting to see how maybe it evolves.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Anytime, anytime. Take care. Talk soon. Bye.